Boop. Hopefully that's on. Okay, when last we streamed last night, we parsed a tweak file for the audio where the tweak file gave options about how to play the sound, like the volume, how many different variants of the sample file there is, and random perturbations on volume and pitch, and inner and outer radius. I just, of course, realized that for this game, these radii are inappropriate because it's a grid-based game where 1.0 is one grid square, so like 20 grid squares is forever, which is a terrible, terrible inner radius. You would never hear a sound get quieter. But we'll fix that later. So we parse the file, but we're not actually using any of the data from the file to play sounds. So today I want to do that. And the question is, well, there's lots of questions. So first of all, we need to associate this data from the tweak file. So here we have a name and some parameters, and we read the name and the parameters, and then we just throw all the information away. So we have to associate the parameters with the name in some way. You might think, well, just make a hash table and do that. But the thing is, we already have effectively a hash table mapping sound names to data, which is this sound catalog thing, right? And we have this thing called sound data. And the question is, where does that live? And should we just drop sound tweaks directly in there? This might be in, oh, it's in the mixer. Well, these are all things. Let's just do it. Let's just put it in there. This is technically maybe not the greatest thing because this is going into a library. And you might imagine, yeah, so we still have a note here. Sound data is full of game-specific stuff. Need to factor this. There's potentially some use for a language feature that would say, we're going to have some struct in here, but it's user expandable so that you can define part of it in your program or something. Now here we just had a bunch of fields, right? Well, these are the actual fields. These two, I don't think should go there because, wait. No, I guess we, I don't remember. I would think that you would pre-multiply the random volume into the volume scale. But probably not, because you recompute the volume every frame when panning anyway, and I think we just do an extra multiply. And the reason for that is that you can have your game code turn this number up and down, and then this just gets attached to that every frame. And that information doesn't kind of get destroyed. Okay. Let's put this got tweaks in here. So if this is set to false, then these are all defaults. We'll just say that. So when we parse an entry for a sound tweaks, we do that. And where did the tweaks used to go? I might have just deleted it because we don't have them. It's not sound. Let's call it sound tweaks. All right. Okay, so we still compile. That's great. Let's change our default inner and outer radius to like 1 and, I don't know, 10, 12, 10. I don't know. We have to feel that out for this game. Someone's asking, this is an off-topic question. Let's try to keep questions on topic today because I want to crank through this and get it done. But a question about the language. With the intent of removing third-party linker, am I concerned about losing ability to do LTO, or do I consider it useless? I consider it useless. I mean, it doesn't make sense when your entire program is one compilation unit anyway, because the whole reason LTO is a thing is because you couldn't see set A of procedures and set B of procedures at the same time because you compiled them totally differently and they were isolated from each other. Well, if you just don't do that, you don't need all this extra complication in the linker, right? Like why, if you just compile them all together in the first place and the compiler knows about them, then the regular compiler's optimizer can handle that, right? Why do you need a link time optimizer? It's stupid. So there you go. Okay. Right. Yeah, some of these things, like all this LTO and all the complications in the linker, they're just what happens when you make a system more and more complicated and don't ever question what you're doing. You have to question what you're doing, or eventually you just get a big mess. And we never questioned that stuff, and we just built up on it over decades, and it's just a bad scene now, so it just has to go away. Okay. Sound tweaks. So we've got the tweak file on the effect now. So let's go back to, it's not sound catalog, it's mixer here. So multiplicative factor chosen when sound is played. Now, here's the thing. So that I make sure that I'm hooking into the rest of the system correctly, I should look, because I probably do already have a thing that manually perturbs the sounds when I play them. It's just they're not based on this configurable tweak data per sound. So let me just go. So I have play sound somewhere. Is that in sound catalog? Yeah. Okay, so here we just pass a parameter to say whether to perturb. And so we just have these hard-coded values. Oh, those go on the issued sound, which probably all this. Yeah, so I think I think all this goes away. Okay. So, do we compile with that? Oh, we do. We weren't even using those. Great. So, instead of passing this perturb parameter, we're just going to use the tweak data. And I'm going to say incomplete, remove perturb parameter. We're not using it anymore. So, if sound.tweaks.got tweaks. Oh, data. It's the sound data that has this. Does that compile? Yep. So we want to do so we want to multiply the tweaks volume scale, right, times the perturb, which, you know, right now we're going to do 1 minus this number and 1 plus this number, right? And this is not good, as I said last night, because once your volume perturb gets big, like 0.5, 1 minus 0.5 is saying like play it at half volume, and 1 plus 0.5 is like not that much louder than 1. So, you know, we really need to decide, maybe it's a multiplicative factor, kind of like the pitch perturbation or something. Okay, so for the rate scale, we're going to say semitones is t dot pitch perturb. And then we need to look up the 12th root of 2, right? Twelfth root of 2. Copy this. Is that okay? All right. It's computing. Thanks. Thanks for that rational approximation. All right, that's bananas. Okay, so 12th root of 2 is this. I'm sure we don't need that many digits, but whatever. It's a compiler test. So we're picking between minus and plus this number of semitones. And then we're going to say rate scale is the power of 12th root of 2 to semitones, right? So if this ends up as 0, then the power, this to the 0 power is going to be 1, right? So we multiply the rate by 1. If it's above 0, then the rate goes up. And if it's below 0, the rate goes down. So like that. Could I make it logarithmic increases and decreases in volume? Maybe. It's just what makes sense practically, you know, because we don't, when we mess with these numbers, we don't necessarily have anything mathematical as our goal. It's just like, I want the sound to vary more or less, but you know, we want it to vary in a way that feels controllable and intuitable by the person who is doing the editing. So it's not clear to me right this second what the best way is to do it, but maybe. What sort of randomness do you use? Normal distribution? No, this is a uniform distribution right now. Again, that's something that maybe maybe you might think that there's a better choice, right? And we can think about that later. So, but for right now, for every single thing in this range, there's an equal probability. So there's no bias towards 0. You might want a bias towards 0, right? Yeah, but these are all, anytime you see random get within range, that's just like equal probability for every value in the range. Okay. So then, so we've got the rate scale, we've got the volume scale, and then I think where is this defined? I think this isn't in entities, it's in sound catalog. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Okay, so these are a lot of the same parameters that we have in the tweaks, but these are the ones that are randomly chosen for this instance of the sound effect, right? Every time we play a sound, we roll up different versions of these values, right? Oh, I picked inner and outer radius of 1 and 10 here, right? Let's move this around a little bit. So let's just set the inner and outer radius to exactly, we don't perturb those. T.inner radius and outer radius. And then what else? Oh, variance. Variance. We got to do that. Why did I just... I'm lost. Okay. So this is a problem. This is the wrong place to put this, because by the time we get here, we've already decided what our sound data is. Let's make sure we still compile because we're about to do some changes. We do. Okay. By the time we've decided this, this is like the pointer to the asset data. So we've already chosen which version of the samples it is, which means it's too late to look at the tweaks and use them to determine which sample to play if there are multiple versions of it, which is one of the things that we want the tweaks to do. So I think there's probably multiple overloads of play sound. Yeah, here we go. All right, so let's take perturb out of here. Let's take perturb out of here. And we're going to have this be the one when you already know the sound data, right? And then we're going to return this. We're going to say sound equals this, return sound. If sound, then we do some tweaks here. So the core version of this is not going to tweak, right? So we're going to say if sound and sound.sound data. We're just being very safe here. Okay. There we go. Oh, wait, we already have this. Oh, right. Here's the funny one. There's going to be a little more work to do here than we thought. Okay. I forgot an implementation detail. The way we do this in games like The Witness and stuff, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make all the tweaks work except for the versions, right? So, because that'll prove that all this is working. And then we can go make the versions work because it's more complicated than I initially assumed. And I'll explain why when we get there. Okay, do we still compile? Okay, so nobody used that. Let's get rid of this perturb flag as well, which some people are probably using. Yeah. So main 475, play menu sound. So we're going to control perturbs from that file now, which is why we don't need it. It's like we're passing false all the time here. Boy, I sure wanted you to... Oh, minimal perturb. No, no, no. Minimal perturb. Let's get rid of that. See, that's another hard-coded perturb. It's just not that much rate perturbation. But again, we're going to control that from the file now. And I'm not going to bother putting the equivalent of this information in the file because our audio guys, the whole reason I'm doing this is so that the guys who are doing the audio will have something to work with. And they're just going to do new audio for the game, which is good because the audio in the game is terrible right now. It's been placeholder audio since the start. So we're just going to clean this stuff out. All right. Okay. Now, in order to test this, I want to make a developer command. We're going to say command play, no, sound, and name is a string. And we're just going to play a sound every time you say sound and then the thing. So we're going to say manager is, I forget what, we'll look at that in a second. And then we're going to say play sound manager name. That's it. Not the menu get entity manager. So this just gives us the main thing that's being used to hold the gameplay entities. Right? When we play sound, we make a sound emission entity and put it in the world, right? Okay, so that's added a sound command. Let's look for, it's so much better than C++ to just be able to do that. So let's look for a sound effect that's not super annoying, that we can play a lot and test all these factors. So how about, I don't know. Yeah, that'll be easy to hear pitch variation. Do I have desktop sound turned on now? Let's check that. Desktop audio. Can you guys hear that? I'm going to turn it up a little. Is that a good volume? Okay. Great. So we got a burp. So now, right, if I run the game, let's turn the music off. And I'm going to go sound squeeze. This is under the Windows thing, so we're moving it out. Why'd that? There we go. Okay. So now let's go to the sound tweaks. And we'll say squeeze. And we're just going to make it real quiet to start, like 0.01. Right? That didn't work at all. Well, that's why we test. So let's try some of the other parameters and just see if they work at all. So squeeze. Oh, we're never... Remember when I said we take all this information and we parse it and then we throw it away? And then I made a slot on the sound so that we wouldn't throw it away, but I never actually put the information in there. So obviously we're not using it. So this is not getting the tweaks yet. So we gotta do that. So back here, we get this tweaks, we get all this information that we're parsing, as you see. And then after we get the information, we want to look it up in the sound catalog. Now, we need to make sure the sound catalog is initialized before this. So why did someone insert this and not indent? That's terrible. Oh, Ignacio put that in as a short-term fix. Yeah, all right. It's fine. Okay. What was I doing? Oh, yeah. So I want to make sure the sound catalog, because we're going to use data from the sound catalog. So I want to make sure that initializes before we do the tweaks, right? So here's the sound catalog init. That's at line 798, and tweaks is at 825. Loading the tweaks must happen after the sound catalog is initted. Can I tell if it's initted? Yeah. Okay. So now we do the following. Sound data is find in sound catalog first word, because the first word is the name of the asset. So if sound data, we do one thing, else we say error handler tweak for not found in sound catalog. A sound that does not exist. We'll just say that. It's more understandable to somebody who doesn't know what the hell the sound catalog is. Okay, so if we got the sound data, then sound data dot tweaks equals tweaks. Wanted bool. Oh yeah. Can't just do that. It's not called. Did I call it sound tweaks? Tweak. Call it tweak. First word, not first name. Dummy. Okay. Great. So, what was our sound called? Squeeze. Oh, you could barely hear that, or not at all. I couldn't hear it. How about 0.1? Oh, yeah. 0.5. 0.99. 10. 100. 10,000. I guess I'm clamping the volume at some point because that's really not. Yeah, but that's fine. The data is getting through and being used. Okay, so now let's try some of the other parameters, right? So random. Let's say 0.5 and 0 semitones. So volume scale, but no volume scale, but no pitch scale right now. So that's obviously working. Now let's add some pitch scale. 2 semitones is a fair amount. Two semitones is a little too much. Like, that often makes sounds sound bad, but you know, let's make it 1 semitone and 3. We're taking it a little more subtle, right? That might still be a little too much, because you know, along with the number of sample variants, you just want enough to make it not sound like exactly the same thing. It's a frog song, yeah, almost. Okay, what were our other options? Inner and outer radius, which we're not, this command is not going to test those because it's not putting a spatialized sound anywhere. Volume scale, I don't know, what were they? Radius, versions, that was the only other thing. Okay, we can't test versions yet. Okay. I'm going to check this in. I'm going to take out this print because we don't want to spam people. Use some of the tweaks when playing sounds. Okay, so now here's the issue. We store the sound tweaks data on the entry in the sound catalog for the asset. And that's what we did in the witness also. What that means is that that catalog doesn't only store entries for actual assets on disk, because the assets on disk will be things like, if we say versions 3, right, that means we have sounds called squeeze 1, squeeze 2, and squeeze 3. But when the engine plays it, it's just trying to play squeeze. And so we need to be able to look up squeeze, at least the way we did it in the witness. We need to be able to look up squeeze and be seeing an asset that does not actually exist on disk, that has no actual sound data associated with it, but that tells us how many versions there are. I'm not sure I want to do that this way. That doesn't feel like the right thing to me. I think I just want to have a separate hash table of tweaks. I think. And then when people play that sound, you look up the tweaks, and if they don't exist, then you say, okay, there's 0 versions, and then we look up the sound asset. Now, why wouldn't that be a good idea? It wouldn't be a good idea because then we have to be looking up by name and not a like in reality, if you want to be really fast, you don't want to look up something by name all the time at runtime. Although in this game, that's never going to be an issue. It's just, the reason I'm thinking about this is it's kind of hacky to have this thing that doesn't actually represent an asset on disk. And we do asset catalogs differently here than we did in the witness. In this game, at startup, we pre-scan the data folder and create entries for everything. So we would have to also create entries when we load a sound tweak. Maybe that's okay. I don't know. Does anyone have an opinion about this? Would I benefit from a step value for the pitch randomness rather than a continuous range, like always landing on a quarter tone, for example? I'm not sure. It might be interesting to ask the audio guys about that. For something that's very musical, then yes. For something that's noise, then no, right? Like it wouldn't matter. So I guess we just ask them. So I'll put that in the tweet. I'll put that. It's a good question. Possible improvements. Should we have a step value that controls okay. Is a pitch variation in semitones. There are 12 semitones to an octave. And going up an octave means multiplying the sampling rate by 2. So we take the 12th root of 2 to the power of how do I explain this? So first we pick a factor between minus s and s, then we take the 12th root of 2 to the power of that factor, gives us a number by which to multiply the sampling rate. Okay, I just wanted to finish that explanation that we started last night. Synchronizer Mam says, it does seem hacky to force load tweaks in the same way you load other things, even if loading those other things involves something completely different. I don't know. I don't know what you're saying there. You don't think landing on semitones or quarter tones matters, even if the sound is a musical melody? Maybe not. I don't know. That's something where, you know, I have no domain-specific expertise. I don't do much audio design, so I can't say. Most engines you've seen distinguish between the raw sound assets and a playable audio asset that contains data, such as the tweaks and a ref to the raw sound asset. Yeah, but I'm not most game engines. Like, a lot of game engines are in love with being complicated, honestly, and I don't like that. Like, why should there be a whole extra thing? I don't think that's necessary. I mean, we do, for example, in the witness engine, we do process sound assets, but it's only for really good reasons. Like, okay, on this particular platform, we have a custom sample format that's faster to play back or something, right? In those cases, we process it into that, right? That's not even really true, but like, okay, lower end platform, we take down the compression level of a lot of the sounds so that they'll fit, right? And so then we have a processed version of those assets. But like making more kinds of things when you don't need more kinds of things is not good for system complexity. Okay. So what am I going to do? I started out by thinking I don't want to do the dummy asset thing, but then I'm realizing that's going to prevent me from being able to look up a sound data and then replay it later using that sound data pointer. So I think we're going to leave the dummy entry method. Okay. So we go to sound tweaks here. Instead of find, I think we have a find or create. Find or load? Reload asset, no. I'm looking in the wrong file. So find or create, right? So here we say find or create. Because if this sound effect has versions, we won't have a pre-existing entry in the catalog, but need to make one so that the engine can find an entry under the base name prior to appending a sample index. Okay, so we're going to find or create this, and we're going to set the tweaks. Unless we run out of memory or something awful. Okay. How are we doing? Great. Now, let's go back. I've got to undo something that I did, right? Remember how I said, hey, this by name version is going to pick the sound data and then call the tweak version. Actually, we want you to be able to play by sound data so that you don't have to do the name lookup. And we will do the tweaks. Yeah, so here we're going to do this. We're going to say if data.versions assert data.versions is greater than 0, there better not be a negative number in there. So index is random get mod data.versions plus 1, right? So we've got a number between 1 and the number of versions. and we're going to say of course, we're just suffering a name lookup. Like, let's do this out here. Because we don't, like, if this is supposed to be the low-level routine, we don't want to go back up to a name lookup from there. So here we do this. We look up the data. If the data's got versions, we say index new name is tprint. And then play sound manager new name and return. Oh, well, we got to do that before checking the number of channels, right? Okay. Great. So if we've got versions, we call back, you know, with the new name version, right? Okay. But let's apply the tweaks here. Now this is weird because right now I'm saying I'm doing this so that you could play a sound where you have the pointer and not the name. But you can't ever get from the pointer to a different version of the effect, right? So playing from this low level entry point. The reason is that the whole point of calling this is that you want to do it quickly with a pre-cached pointer, but to avoid name lookup. But we don't store an array of pointers to all the versions on the sound data, so there is no way to fall back to versions without doing a name lookup. Yeah, okay. This seems non-ideal, but unless we want to do this in actual reality, I am not going to spend the resources of allocating those arrays. You know what I'm saying? Do you know what I am saying here? Okay. So we play some sounds, right? Okay. Versions is not right. It's not data.versions. It's data.tweaks.versions. Return statement is missing argument 1. Main line 202. Okay. So, do we have in our sound folder anything with versions, or do I need to copy something from the witness? Okay. Troll attack. Okay, so all right. So So there's 4 different versions, and you see we're playing different ones every time. Right? We're just saying troll attack, and we're getting one of troll attack 1, 2, 3, or 4. But, you know, we're not doing anything else to vary the sound, so it could sound quite repetitive if it happens very often like this. Now, again, maybe, let's put that also in improvements. Should we do something where we ensure that the same sample, that if there are versions, the same sample is not played twice in a row. Okay, versions 4, random 0.31. Now let's go 0.5, 1.5, right? I'm not convinced that that's working. It's not working. Okay, the reason why it's not working is the following. We're only storing this tweak data on the base effect. We're not storing it on the versions, but when we play the sound, we're using the tweaks from the versions. So either I could do a hack where in the sound tweak loading, I look up all the versions and poke it in there, which is a little bit slow. I think instead, I'm going to do this. Like if we got there from a master, right, then we pass it here. And sorry, whoops. The tweak source is data, right? And there we go. So if we have a tweak source, we get the tweaks. This is not capital null. If we have a tweak source, we get the tweaks from that. Otherwise, we get it from the data that we looked up, right? So okay. All right, let's try this again. Sound, troll, attack. That's what happens when you have very wide ranges on all these things. So that's basically what I wanted to do today for the stream. It might be time for me to go get breakfast. Are there any questions about what we did today? The next thing, when we do the next audio stream, I probably need to print a debug screen of like, here's all the sounds that are playing and at what volume and where in the buffer and all that stuff. So we'll probably do that next. So people are talking about implementing reverb by looking ahead versus behind. The thing is, if you only look behind, then you add latency to your pipeline. And that's probably bad. Is this more powerful than the audio system used in the witness or just different? Right now it is just different. Right now it is less powerful because there's a bunch of stuff in the witness about dealing with footsteps very specifically that we don't have right now. But they don't, all that stuff doesn't necessarily make sense for this game. So because this is in a different programming language, we're re-implementing things and in a way that is appropriate for this game. Any other questions? Let's check this in. I had sound tweaks on my to-do list, and I was all like, oh man, that's a whole system that I have to port over, and it'll be a pain in the butt. But I didn't even port it over. We wrote it from scratch, and it works great, and it's pretty simple, which makes me happy. So let me just go, just as an example, this is just a ridiculous. Okay. This is just as an example to the audio people about, what kinds of things you might say. Wow, did my chat die, or does nobody have any last questions before I go get breakfast? Oh, there's chat. Coming from a company where the build times can reach 30, 45 minutes for the game, I'm looking forward to your language. Looks great. Thank you. I definitely have been in work environments where it took 45 minutes to build the game, and that was such a pain in the ass. Unreal Engine. That was back in 2002 or 2003 when computers were a lot slower. I'm surprised that a game takes 45 minutes today. That seems really long to me, but I'm not totally surprised, just a little bit surprised. What, are you using an engine, or is it in-house code, or what's going on there? Maybe pitch needs a keyword too now, maybe. I don't know. We'll see, the audio people can give me feedback on whether they want, whether they want more or less. You know what I'm saying? How long have I been programming? Well, non-professionally since I was 10 years old, and I'm 46 now, so 36 years. Using Unreal Engine because of their assets, is that a reasonable reason to use something like Unreal? I can't say. I mean, if you can spend a little bit of money on someone building things for you, then you don't necessarily need that. But it does cost money and time, so I don't know. I haven't actually looked at what assets you get with Unreal, so I can't say. Is last night's stream going to be up on YouTube? Yes, I will post it today. You've been watching Stanford lectures on convex optimization. The lecturer claims that places where engineers use decibels tend to be places where mixing two values, you'd use the geometric mean instead of the average, and when you're optimizing, this corresponds to making the problem convex. The thing is, it's just not like using a geometric mean or whatever is fine. It's just that decibels are not an intuitive way to communicate anything. They're just garbage, right? So we have intuitive ways of communicating that. For example, astronomers and physicists care about, that kind of thing all the time. They just use scientific notation for their number. They say whatever times 10 to the whatever, and the exponent is sort of how you gauge the magnitude of what you're talking about, right? And that's much easier to understand and much easier to reason about than these made-up units that, like, what is minus 32 dB SPL? Like, I don't even frickin' know. It doesn't mean anything. So, yeah. What are the odds of more streams later today? Well, I'm not going to stream during the workday, but I might after, like at night. Maybe not. If there is one, it'll probably be late at night. It's an in-house engine built over a decade, but it has a custom language that's basically a wrapper over C++ to facilitate safe RAII. Well, those words, facilitate safe RAII, give me hives, so I'm sorry you have to deal with that, but okay. When will you hear from the game? I don't know when we will announce this game. Later. Did I make Braid all by myself? I did most of the programming with some people coming in at the end to help. I didn't do any of the visuals, right? Other people did the visual graphics, drawing the images, I mean. Mostly David Hellman, but Edmund McMillan also did some stuff. And some people worked on sound and whatever. Sean Barrett did a little bit of the effects programming at the end of development. Wow. We've got our second month in a row of Tier 1 sub. This is amazing. It's like Twitch professional situation. All right, let's host someone again.